Good evening. We are here with the Hibbing Chamber of Commerce Political Forum this evening, and we have the opportunity to hear today from one of our two U.S. congressional candidates, Jen Schultz. Congressman Stelber declined to join us in the forum, so we are speaking with Jen today. And we're going to start with questions. My name is Steve Potts. I teach history and political science at Minnesota North College in Hibbing. And Pastor Dan Erickson and I have been doing the forums for many, many years. My hair was originally the same color as Jen's when we started doing this, so it's been a while. Jen, thank you for coming up today. Let me start out with this question. And what we're going to do is I'll do two questions, and Pastor Dan will do two. We'll switch back and forth. The public is seriously concerned with rising and record deficit spending. Given these concerns, would you reduce federal spending, and in which areas might spending be reduced?
Well, I first want to thank the Hibbing Chamber for hosting this debate. And I want to thank you, Steve Potts, and Pastor Dan Erickson for moderating. Really appreciate this time to be in front of the public, talking about why I'm running. And again, my name is Jen Schultz, running for Congress in Minnesota's 8th District. And I'm running for Congress because the people of the 8th District deserve a better leader. And I was a state legislator for 8 years, getting things done and solving problems. I had a 100% pro-labor voting record that I'm very proud of. And I want to do that in DC to bring back investments in our community and in people. I think it's really important and vital, and people see that there's a lot of dysfunction and chaos in DC, and we need to send people to DC who want to work across the aisle to do good things for our district. And I just want to quickly tell a little bit about myself, and then I'll answer your question, Steve. But I grew up, I'm the daughter of a single mother. My father was a firefighter and volunteered to serve in Vietnam, which he did. I started working at age 14, parking cars at the county fair. Then I worked as a waitress, making $2 an hour, and then at a grocery store, picking up extra shifts so I could help pay for college. And I know what it's like to struggle to pay bills, and I know a lot of people in our district are struggling. So my priority in Congress will be to help reduce the costs that working families face. My second priority will be to strengthen Medicare, Social Security, and really protect and expand services for veterans. And my third priority will be protect our rights, our liberty, our independence, and reproductive rights, and make sure the government is not involved in healthcare decisions that are private. So I'm happy and excited to be here to answer questions, and really looking forward to this.
Would you like me to repeat the question?
Sure.
I jumped in ahead of time, I'm sorry. The public is seriously concerned with rising and record deficit spending. Given these concerns, would you reduce federal spending, and in which areas might spending be reduced?
So we do, the federal government is exceeding their revenue each year, and that is leading to deficits, and those accumulated deficits are debt, which we're looking at about $40 trillion in debt. And it is a concern to have this much debt because as interest rates rise, that interest on that debt takes up a larger portion of our gross domestic product. So we do need to be concerned about how much we spend as a country. And the things that we should be looking at is making sure that everyone is paying their fair share in taxes, and that means billionaires and corporations. We have a lot of savings. There's a lot of waste in programs like Medicare, where we're overpaying private health insurance plans for Medicare Advantage. It's about over $1 trillion in the next 10 years. We're overpaying Medicare Advantage. We thought giving people the option of a private health insurance company for Medicare would save the government money. It has never saved the government one penny. So there's definitely savings to be had to make sure we're paying private health plans appropriately for Medicare Advantage. But the biggest part of our budget is Medicare, Social Security, healthcare, and income assistance and tax programs like the child tax credit. And those programs are really important for a lot of people in our district. But I think there's a lot of waste and fraud and a lot of corporate welfare that we can look at to reduce federal spending and actually reduce, my goal is to reduce federal taxes that it face people in the 8th District. I don't know if a lot of people know this, but for every dollar we pay in federal taxes in Minnesota, we only get back 70 cents of every dollar. So we're really not leveraging or getting back what we pay in. My goal will be to make sure we get more back in federal investments in our state and in our communities and reduce that tax, the federal tax on individuals. And that could be eliminating taxes, all taxes on Social Security income. And we can talk about that more, but right now, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but people making over $1 million, they're only paying into Social Security up to $168,000 of their income. So we can fix and strengthen Social Security by making sure that the very wealthy, when they're making a lot of money, they're paying into Social Security. That's an easy fix to bring in more revenue and to strengthen that program.
Thank you. Jen, this last session of Congress has been derided in the media as the do-nothing Congress. They accomplish very little. If you were elected, what might be done to return Congress to a productive, responsive institution?
So it is very disappointing that in the last 6 years, Congress has never been able to get all of their appropriation bills finished by the October 1st deadline. My opponent's been in Congress for 6 years, and this last year particularly has been dysfunctional and chaotic, and it's the most unproductive Congress in history. They passed very few bills. Right now, they're having to do a continuing resolution because they've only passed 5 of the appropriation bills, and there's 12. So I think a lot of folks are disappointed. There's a lot of polarization. There's a lot of division. People just are not working together. And I tell folks, it matters who you send to Congress. Please send people to Congress who are willing to work together and in a bipartisan way to solve the real problems that people face. There's so much political scorekeeping happening in political theater, and it's not good for our country. When I get to Congress, I'll make sure I get things done and work with others, everyone, regardless of party. I think it's time we put country above party and solve problems. And I did that for 8 years as a state legislator. 80% of my bills had bipartisan support. I was only in a divided government, so no one party had complete control. To get anything passed legislatively, I had to work with my Republican colleagues, and I did, and I got a lot of things done. I closed corporate tax loopholes, and I expanded affordable health coverage for Minnesotans. I was able to secure every single bonding infrastructure bill for my district over that 8 years, including an all-cash request for a new hospital in Duluth. So I'm proud of my record, and I want to take that to DC and work for the people.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Jen, increasing demands for energy pose a unique challenge for our district, especially for our mining industry. What would be the best way to ensure increased energy supplies, and what should the federal government's role be in encouraging that?
Well, we need an all-of-the-above approach to energy policy. And right now, folks are expressing concern about the high prices of gasoline. But a lot of folks don't know that we're drilling for oil at record amounts, never before. So we're drilling more, I think it's close to 13 million barrels per day. We are producing more oil than any other country. And what has to happen is that we have just a few companies that control fossil fuels and that production, and they can dictate what the prices are. So we have to make sure that we're enforcing antitrust laws to break up those cartels, those large trusts, to get more price competition in the market. And my opponent, unfortunately, he had an opportunity to look at the high gas prices. There was a bill called Consumer Fuel Price Gouging Prevention Act. It's HR 7688. And my opponent, Pete Stauber, voted no on that bill. So there's things that we can do to reduce folks' prices at the pump. We're not doing those, but we are producing a lot of fossil fuel and oil in this country. But we need to look at green energy, all energy alternatives. My concern is as we're producing more fossil fuel energy, we're also producing more green energy, but our demand for energy isn't falling, it's increasing, and a lot of that is due to cryptocurrency mining and artificial intelligence. We have to do a better job of being more efficient in using energy and reducing our demand for energy.
Thank you. Debates about tariffs play a large part in recent political discussions. How can we protect American industries while at the same time avoiding price increases for consumers?
Well, I do, am worried about rising prices for working families. I know how hard it is. I have 2 teenage boys. My husband works. I work full-time as a teacher of economics. My husband's a criminologist. We have a 16 and 14-year-old at home. And I'm also looking to probably having to take care of my mother as she ages. And I'm part of that sandwich generation where we're taking care of our parents and our children at the same time. But I know President Trump has mentioned increasing tariffs on all goods coming into the United States. That is not a sound economic policy, because what that does is it's not the other countries that are paying those tariffs. It's American businesses who import those goods, pay that tariff, and then they pass on that higher cost to consumers. So what it will lead to are higher prices of goods. And I know working families don't want that. So we need sound policy that helps lower costs that working families face. And we can do that again by enforcing antitrust. Most people don't know that a few companies own most of the grocery industry. It's a highly consolidated market. More so outside Minnesota, we're lucky to have a little bit more competition. But that allows the grocery industry to charge higher prices. And I know our farmers are not getting that. It's going at the top of that chain, value-added chain, and going to the grocery industry. So we have to make sure there's more competition to lower prices for working families. And we have to make sure that people are getting paid living wages and good benefits. I know a lot of folks I talk to are concerned about corporate welfare. You know, why when Walmart or McDonald's, they're not paying living wages, their employees could be eligible for public programs. So it is responsible. The corporations and large employers should be paying living wages so workers can keep up with any inflation. We've seen a lot of wage stagflation. We need to make sure wages are rising with the costs of living.
Thank you, Jen. Steve?
Jen, many of the communities in the 8th District have a strong need for increased affordable housing. What should Congress do to increase housing options and ensure affordable housing?
Well, housing is one of the top issues I hear about throughout the district. We just do not have enough affordable housing. And this is true everywhere as small as Vedette, Minnesota, and Hackensack, and Tower. All of those folks need affordable housing. And so it's an ongoing crisis, not just in our region and our state, but across the country. And so what can we do about that? We have to assist local units of government to provide incentives to developers to build housing. I think our communities, some of them are working together to get the volume that the developers are looking for in building more units. We also have to improve our aging housing stock, which is very old in our district. And I know that Senator Tina Smith has just introduced legislation called the HOME Act, and that establishes a federal-backed development authority to help finance the building of new units. And it also uses union workers to build that, because I know financing can be very difficult, especially when interest rates are high. It's very volatile. So securing financing is one way to do that. And I know there's a lot of support for that legislation, and we'll be excited to work on that when I'm elected next year. I also support a housing tax credit to help working families afford homes, but we also need to make sure that we're looking at limiting purchases by Wall Street or private equity groups that are buying our housing and then doing Airbnbs or vacation rentals. We also need to make sure we have strong monetary policies to lower our mortgage interest rates. So our communities, businesses, we need housing. I know there are a lot of businesses that want to expand, and one of the challenges is that they just don't have enough housing to hire more employees. So our communities and our local industries, they're going to grow when people can afford to live here, and that is definitely a priority for me when I'm elected.
Thank you. Given our region's reliance upon mining, what is your view of current and proposed mining projects in northern Minnesota? And how can we ensure that such projects operate while also ensuring a safe environment?
Yeah, so mining is an important issue for a lot of folks in the 8th District. We've been mining taconite for over 100 years. We have a proud history of doing it and doing it well. I want to make sure that we do responsible mining. There's one thing that everyone agrees on when I talk to folks, and that's they do not want to pollute our water. So when and how it goes forward, I want to bring everyone to the table, including the 7 tribes, which haven't been consulted very much. But what's happening right now is that we have a long permitting process for mining. We need to, I know that the EPA out of Chicago Region 5, they have given advice to the state of Minnesota to update our permitting process. That has to happen within our state agencies and in the state legislature. I hope that happens at the state level. But we also need to make sure that everyone's at the table, including the tribes, the environmental groups, the mining corporations or their representatives, independent scientists, community stakeholders, and work together to find out how are we going to do responsible mining. So my opponent has been talking about mining for his entire 6 years in Congress, and mining hasn't moved forward. Instead, it gets litigated in the courts and it gets stopped, any type of new mining. And that's because it's in violation of the 1854 treaty rights, hunting, gathering, and fishing rights. And so it's important, paramount, that we bring everybody together to figure out how we're going to move forward on mining. What has to happen immediately is we need to bring back federal funds to make the investment in the science and the research to figure out how to filter out any toxins from the water when mining occurs. And I know that NRI has some technology. There's entrepreneurs that have developed some technology. They need the resources to find out how they can scale that up to do it well. And that hasn't happened under Stauber. He has not taken advantage of any of the appropriation bills, like the Inflation Reduction Act or the bipartisan infrastructure bill or any of the ARPA bills that have passed. He should have appropriated funds to put into the science and the development of this new technology, and he hasn't, and he had many opportunities to do that. I think he just wants to make mining a divisive issue, and he runs on it, and it's a political point for him. But I think people are expecting a lot more, and when I'm in Congress, I'll make sure we bring back the federal funding to do the research so we can do mining without polluting the water.
Thank you.
And you touched on this in the previous question, but environmental regulations and permitting processes are intended to ensure responsible business stewardship, but this does add time to implement those innovations and increases the cost of the product. So what legislative changes would you support that would both maintain this high standard of human and environmental protections while at the same time reducing barriers to markets?
Yeah, like I said, initially, when I was a Great Lakes Commissioner for 8 years concurrently, when I was a state legislator, I was appointed as a Great Lakes Commissioner, and my job was to protect and to promote the Great Lakes and the watershed. So I worked very closely with the EPA Region 5 out of Chicago, and that's when I learned that they had given advice to update our permitting process, which can be very long. It is important to have the regulation because I'm sure there are not many people in Northeast Minnesota that trust multinational corporations. If we had no regulation and no permitting, they would have no incentive to not pollute our water, and they would just be trying to maximize their revenue and profit without regards to what happens to our communities. And I think we've learned a lot from Flint, Michigan, when their water was polluted. What happens is we lose most of our wealth is in our property, and that would harm people in the 8th District. So we need to update the permitting process to look at everything to make it more efficient and to get those permits through quicker. But that review is vital, so people have the confidence that any type of resource extraction that's done is done well, and it doesn't affect our water or our property value.
Thank you. Another issue, economic issue we face is workforce. How might federal programs and funding best be utilized to develop and train people to work in both existing and new businesses and industries here in the 8th District?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, you know, we need to invest in job training, and we need to have strong programs in job training, especially for new jobs on the horizon, like with green technology and jobs that are in high demand fields. We also need to support the trade apprenticeship programs that I know the unions have been asking for federal support for those, and I support those programs. But we need to update the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act to expand access to job training programs to a much larger set of workers who are either underemployed or earning really low wages. We need to also remove barriers to using those programs, and these barriers could be lack of transportation or lack of childcare, or maybe resources just to cover the materials and fees that are required for these trainings. So we need to do all of the above to get our workers the skills that they need. It is exciting that in Minnesota now for state jobs, you don't need a 4-year degree. I think that's a positive move forward. And, you know, everyone has a computer on their cell phone now. So I think they have easy access to a lot of knowledge and information, and how they use that will be, I'm sure, involved in the training programs that we need to develop.
Thank you, Jen.
School shootings in the last year or so have reached unprecedented levels. How can we best maintain our Second Amendment rights while reducing gun violence?
That's a great question. I was just at Proctor High School for the day teaching in front of 5 different government classes, and this question came up about what do we do about gun violence. I think it's very close to them because they have shooting drills frequently, and they wanted to know what I would do when I'm elected to Congress. And we just need to pass at the federal level common sense bills to address gun violence. I fully 100% support Second Amendment rights. You know, I grew up with a gun storage cabinet in our dining room. It was never locked. But I think there's common sense laws that I voted for as a state legislator, things like background checks and red flag laws. 90% of the population supports those, and those need to pass at the federal level. And we need to make sure that people who are having a mental health crisis don't have easy access to guns, because guns are often used for suicides, and we need to prevent suicides as much as possible. So I think there's common sense policies that most Americans support, that I support, that will not infringe on people's Second Amendment rights.
Thank you. Polls show a major concern Americans have is with our broken immigration system. What reforms would you support to ensure border security while also allowing for legal immigration?
Well, the first thing I would do is pass the bipartisan border security bill that did not pass. It was constructed in the Senate, the U.S. Senate, and it was co-written by a really conservative senator from Oklahoma. And it had bipartisan support, and it was passed in the Senate. And the U.S. House refused to take up the bill because former President Trump told his colleagues, his Republican friends, that he wanted to run on this issue. It's really unfortunate that they're trying to score political points when everyone knows that we need a strong border. And here was a bill that would not only provide that, but also funds for the fentanyl crisis and providing more money to the border security agents who supported this bill. So it was really unfortunate that that bill did not pass, that reform is not being implemented. So the first thing we should do is pass that bill. We also need to reform the asylum process so it doesn't take so long. And we also are facing in this country huge workforce shortages. And chambers of commerce and businesses are talking about this. So we still need a path to citizenship and work visas to address shortages, in our resort industry, in our ag industry, and meat processing. Some organizations in Minnesota before the pandemic, they were bringing over folks from the Philippines on work visas to work in our nursing facilities. So we have a huge shortage and need to address border security and a path to citizenship and update the asylum process.
Thank you.
Jen, we live at a time where there are many concerns over the racial divides in our nation that seem to be evident and increasing. What measures might we take and might the federal government take to reduce racial tensions in America?
Yeah, our communities, this is what I often hear, are becoming so polarized. There is much more hate and anger and bitterness, and it does not help that we have political individuals who are adding to that or encouraging it by what they say. You saw that in what J.D. Vance said and what Trump said about legal migrants in Ohio from Haitian, who they just lied about things, and that led to bomb threats, and people's lives were being threatened in Ohio. So we need responsible leaders who understand and have a commitment to addressing this polarization and anger, and need to lead with more positive energy and joy, and understand that we have a diverse country, and that makes us a great country, that diversity. We are all, if you're not Native American, you are descended from immigrants into this country. And we need to remember that. And immigration policy, our immigrants here legally pay taxes, and they help our economy. The most conservative think tank, the Cato Institute, has done research to show the benefit of having legal immigration in this country. It helps all of us. They are not stealing our jobs. In terms of, we have a lot of work to do on racial equity. When I was a state legislator, we declared racism a public health crisis, and we looked at every single bill from an equity perspective, even our bonding bill, to see if it would help address inequities in our state. And that was a really positive thing that had support by both Republicans and Democrats. And we have a lot more work to do on that, but we have to really stop sending out lies and disinformation that weaponizes someone's words and leads to death threats. So it's really unfortunate to score political points that they're jeopardizing people's lives, and even elected officials' lives are at risk. Many of our elected officials have had death threats because of what other leaders say, and I think a lot of people want to turn the page on this hatred and bitterness and start uniting our country and our communities, and we need to elect leaders that are willing to do that instead of promoting more hate and anger.
Thank you, Jen. Do you favor legislation to increase the number of justices on the Supreme Court? And would your answer depend on who won the presidential election? And are there other reforms of the federal judiciary you would support?
Yes, we definitely need to have ethics training by our Supreme Court justices. They need to have ethical guidelines that are enforced. They should not be accepting vacation packages or gifts, excessive gifts to try to convince them to vote one way or the other. I think that is unethical, and we need reform there. And I know President Biden has initiated some of that. We need to make sure when there's opening on the Supreme Court that it's not prevented for any president to be able to fill those positions just because it's 2 months before an election. I think when there's an opening, it should be filled in the timeline that's reasonable to vet the candidates. So I think those two things definitely need to happen, and I think that we should, as a country, discuss whether, a lot of people have lost faith in institutions, including the Supreme Court. How do we build back that trust in our government institutions? Those conversations have to happen, and we need conversations about how we go forward on any other reforms to the Supreme Court.
Do you have a position on whether we should increase the number of justices on the Supreme Court?
I'm an economist, not an attorney or with excessive legal background, so I would definitely consult. I know experts that have more expertise in constitutional law, like Representative Jamie Raskin and others, but I think it's a discussion we should have as a country, and I'd be eager to talk to constituents about what they thought before I make any decisions on whether it should be expanded.
Okay, thank you.
This one comes back to an area you're more familiar with. You work in the sphere of public education. What do you see as the challenges facing Americans when it comes to education today? And if elected, what would you encourage Congress to do to meet those challenges?
Yeah, so having educational opportunities is really important. You know, I wouldn't be here today without the help of government student loans to get a college degree and go on to graduate school. And I was, like I mentioned, I was in Proctor in 5 classes, and I stayed the whole day. I ate lunch at the school, and I realized that the teachers are being asked to do a lot more. They are cleaning the lunchrooms. They are cleaning their own classrooms. They should be preparing their courses and their curriculum and grading, which is a lot of work as a teacher, I know. So we are putting a lot more burden on teachers. We're expecting them to do more. Kids are coming to school with greater needs, especially with behavioral health issues. The budgets have been constrained. They don't have enough specialists in behavioral health or mental health. They need more. I was down at the St. Croix River Education District meeting and learned about their needs and how they have more students with special education needs and they don't have the resources. So it's getting very difficult, especially in our rural areas, that we're seeing drop in enrollment, and that affects their budgets. So we need to make sure that there's adequate federal funding for our schools, that our teachers have the resources they need to deliver good education, high quality education, and not be asked to do other things. And I know some of that is because schools, there's a workforce shortage, but they're not able to pay competitive wages. So making sure that they can pay higher wages to attract the staff that they need to keep their facilities upgraded. And a lot of the school districts are asking for special levies, and a lot of folks are voting no on that because there's pressure on their property taxes, and they're not able or not willing to vote for higher property taxes. The only way we can alleviate that is through federal and state funding, more funding for our public schools. And I truly believe it is a priority to make those investments because the return is so high when we invest in education opportunities for our young folks.
Thank you. Controversy swirls this electoral season around women's reproductive rights. What would you do or might be done to ensure better health care for women and to guarantee the reproductive rights? And are there any restrictions to abortion, such as bans on late-term abortions, you believe are appropriate?
Well, reproductive health care is very important to me and a lot of people in the state and our district. And I support fully, I'm a pro-choice. I believe that women should have access to the reproductive health care that they need. And allowing the states to make decisions, you can see what's happened. We have a woman who has died because she could not access the care she needed in Georgia. Georgia refused to give her the medical care she needed. That's Amber Thurman. And then I actually got to meet Amanda Zawalski, who could not get the care she needed in Texas and almost died from sepsis. So it puts women's lives at risk when they can't get the medical care they need. And I do not want my elected official in the exam room with my doctor. The physicians need to make these decisions with their patient. We need to give them that ability. We should not be prosecuting physicians for providing necessary medical care to women. I also support full access to birth control. I also support access to IVF treatment. My opponent is anti-choice. He wants to ban abortion and with no other exclusions. He voted no on access to birth control pills. He is a co-sponsor of a bill that makes it impossible for individuals to access IVF treatment. And this is not a path forward. Women fought for these rights that we've had for over 50 years. What we need to do is codify Roe v. Wade. It's one of the things I will do when I'm elected. So we don't have women dying again. We just can't go back 50 years. And a lot of women, including my mother, remember what happened. Women died because they couldn't get the healthcare services they need. And we've had doctors moving to our state from other states like Iowa because they're afraid to practice in those states because they're afraid of going to jail for just delivering healthcare services to women.
Thank you.
Jen will move a little farther away from home to Ukraine and ask what do you believe Congress should be doing to, again, as far as our role in the Ukrainian conflict war with Russia?
Well, I'm very worried about what Vladimir Putin is doing and what his plans are, even outside of Ukraine, as the wealthiest, the most wealthiest country and ones with military ability and the funding. We should be supporting our allies, our NATO allies. We should be working with our NATO allies to make sure that Vladimir Putin is not expanding his assault on other countries. I think that's what a lot of folks are worried about. If we can stop them in Ukraine, it'll be a lot cheaper than if it goes outside of Ukraine. So we should be supporting Ukraine. I support funding Ukraine and making sure our NATO allies are also helping support Ukraine. It can't just be the US, but that's our role, to save democracy in other countries. And if we didn't do that in World War II, where would we be? If the US did not step up to save or help our allies, we may not have a democratic country to save in the US. So I think it's important. That's our role in this world as the wealthiest country.
And what role do you believe the United States should play in the conflict between Israel and Hamas and Hezbollah in the Middle East right now?
Yeah, well, it's what's happening right now. It's really escalating in the Middle East. I'm very concerned about it. It's very serious, and it's a tragedy on both sides. I mean, we're just recognizing the 1-year anniversary of when the terrorists killed 1,200 Israelis, and they retaliated. But what's happening also in Gaza is a humanitarian crisis. Innocent women and children are dying. So we need an immediate ceasefire. We need to end the conflict and the war. So whatever the U.S. can do diplomatically is important. It might be too late, honestly. The escalation is so high now. Israel's went into Lebanon and Iran. This fighting, this conflict has been going on for so long. And we just have to stop fighting over religion and land and oil and realize that we're going to have bigger issues to worry about as the climate warms, and we have challenges with areas that it's too hot to live in, that they don't have potable, drinkable water, and we're going to see global migration patterns, and that's going to lead to potentially more wars. So we just have to end the fighting, and whatever the U.S. can do diplomatically, and I know they're trying, they have to continue that.
Thank you.
And healthcare costs continue to increase. How should healthcare be reformed to improve access to service and lower costs?
That's a big question. I know we don't have all day, but I've been working on healthcare reform for 20 years. I was really proud of the work I did as a state legislator. I'm a healthcare economist, and I continue to track and work on federal health policy legislation, so I'm eager to get into Congress to move things forward. I was very proud of the work we did by fixing the Affordable Care Act, allowing individuals who have very high premiums to their employer with family coverage. We allowed them to buy into the Minnesota Care Program, a program we've had for over 30 years in the state for affordable health coverage. We spend a lot of money on healthcare, and we have to get to the root of the problem, and that is high medical prices. We need to start addressing high medical prices. I was proud to draft legislation that has passed in 12 other states to look at the benchmarking of medical price growth in healthcare, just to track it, just to collect the data and find out, is it growing faster than inflation, and why, and make those folks that are charging high prices accountable, make them explain to us why they have to raise prices. And I'm very, it's very promising that we can now, under the Biden-Harris administration, negotiate prescription drug prices for the first time. That is gonna save over $6 billion, and it's gonna save individuals over $1 billion in just out-of-pocket savings. That will start in 2026, that they'll see lower drug prices for older adults. Starting next January, Medicare for older adults are capping out-of-pocket drug spending at $2,000. So if you have very high drug spending, you're only going to pay a maximum of $2,000 per year. That is a really, really good way to help people who are on fixed income afford their medication so they're not skipping their medication. We need to make sure that we have affordable health care for working families. Right now, healthcare insurance premiums, if you get it through your employer, it's taking a lot of your take-home pay away because those prices are escalating. And the only way to bring down insurance premiums is to reduce the price of healthcare. And so we have to start addressing that. Things like price gouging. We've seen excessive mergers and acquisitions in the healthcare industry. So if they have monopoly power, they're going to charge whatever they can, whatever they will, because they're trying to make excess profit or revenue. So we have to figure out how to reduce those prices and make healthcare more affordable. I believe healthcare is a right. Everyone should have access to healthcare regardless of income and zip code. What I hear a lot about in our district is that we have a lot of rural hospitals who are struggling. I visited the hospital in Monoman County. They had to go to an emergency-only hospital because they didn't have adequate funding to keep a lot of their services available. So they have 6 to 7 air ambulance rides per day, which is very expensive. So we have to figure out a way to get federal funding to make sure our rural hospitals are thriving and can offer the services that our community members need. And, you know, when employers are looking to see where to expand or move to in our district, they look to make sure there's good health care and good schools and housing. So we need to make sure all of those things are healthy in our rural communities.
Thank you. Do you see accessibility to affordable and quality childcare as a workforce issue? And what ways can the federal government help provide improved access in our district to quality childcare?
Yes, this childcare access has been an issue for several years. I know in my community, we've had 3 childcare centers recently close. So just having them available is important to address, and then the price. So childcare is a workforce issue because if it's not available, it keeps some people out of the workforce because they have to stay home and raise their children. So we need to make sure that, one, we can have it available, and that means reducing any type of regulation that's impeding opening up new childcare centers, making it easier to do that. But we also have to increase the child block grants that come from the federal government to the states so we can pay child care providers more, so we can attract more child care providers and pay them living wages that are competitive with other jobs. This is a high value service, and we should be paying for that value. And a lot of folks, I think, are quitting and going to other jobs because they just don't get the wages that they should be getting for the care that they are providing to our children. So I think it's a barrier that we need to address and make sure we have more facilities opening and they're paid higher wages, and we can do that through these higher child block grants that the federal government has.
Thank you. We'd like to thank you for coming and joining our forum today. We had hoped that we'd have two people presenting their views, but we've got you, and we're happy you're here. We'd like to give you the remainder of the time. We have about 5 minutes left for any closing statement or remarks or any expansion on some of the answers you've had. And the rest of the time is yours.
Well, I want to thank the Chamber again and Steve and Dan for being here today. And I just want to talk to individuals. I know that a lot of you may have voted already, but if you haven't, I hope you consider voting for me. You can go to jenschultzforcongress.com. There's a lot of issues that I discuss, my priorities for being when I'm elected in Congress. But I just want the constituents and voters to know that I have been a public servant as a teacher and as a state legislator for most of my life. I am raising my family in the 8th District. I am very proud to be living in the 8th District. We have a wonderful, wonderful, beautiful district with amazing people. I have traveled all over the district, put on thousands of miles on my car. We've been in over 34 parades. We've had 50+ meet and greets and fundraisers. I'm going out every day to listen to what people need in our community, and I'll do that when I'm elected. I will show up. My opponent hasn't had one in-person town hall meeting in his 6 years in office. He's in the top 11% of missed votes in Congress. He takes over $1 million in corporate interests for his campaign money. He votes against what we value. He's voted against the PRO Act, against labor. He's voted against access to birth control. He voted against the largest bipartisan infrastructure bill in history that is bringing billions of dollars back to our state and district, and that means jobs, good jobs. It's replacing the Blotnick Bridge. It's bringing broadband into our communities, which we desperately need. It's fixing our roads. It is replacing lead line service lines. It's bringing money to our airports and our port. So these are really needed investments that our communities can't fund by themselves or with their tax dollars. So that's really unfortunate. He voted against that, but he's also, by not showing up, he's not listening to what voters need. He's not doing his basic job and being held accountable for his votes in Congress that I am very disappointed about. I thought he would be a moderate Republican, and I worked with him when he was a St. Louis County Commissioner, and he's voted with extreme Republicans in Congress. In fact, he voted against investigating the January 6th insurrection. He wanted to overturn the 2020 election, and a lot of people are very worried about that. He votes with the extremist factions. He voted in the deep minority on a Republican bill to lower healthcare hospital prices. Even though it passed with Republican support, he voted against it. So I don't think he has the best interests of our district in mind when he's in DC. He spends a lot of time at the Capitol Hill Club. If you look at his expenses, I went to DC last fall and learned that he was a backbencher. No one knew who he was. He's not given important legislation to sponsor. He's passed only 2 of his bills into law in his entire 6 years. He named a post office and he created a task force. And I know this district is used to having great representation from folks like Rick Nolan and the late Jim Oberstar, and that's what we need again. We need someone who's gonna go to DC, cut through the politics and get to work in a bipartisan way to solve big problems, and we do have big problems to solve. I know that people are worried about inflation. I know they're worried about border security. And I know that my opponent complains a lot about these issues, and he blames Biden, Harris, and Walz, and he is in a position of power. He's in Congress, and he's been there for 6 years, and he's now in the majority in the U.S. House, and he has done nothing to solve the problems he complains about. And that is what needs to change. We need someone who's actually gonna do something, not talk about it, not talk about the problem to death, but actually do something to solve those problems, and that's what I wanna do. I'm running on my track record of getting things done in the state legislature, and I wanna do that in Congress. I hope you take the time to do your research and look at what I've done, look at what my priorities are on my website. But I know what is really important is that there's a better way forward. It matters who you elect to go to DC to represent our district. And that representation, that person They should be responsive to the needs of the district. They should be showing up to listen to voters. And they should be held accountable on their votes. And that's why I'm running for office, because I know when we invest in people and we invest in our communities, we can all do better. So I'm very, very much looking forward to a better way forward and getting the anger, bitterness out of politics and focusing on the job so it improves everyone's life. I want to thank everyone again for being here and for the viewers for watching this. And I hope you can vote for me on or before November 5th. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Jen. And I will remind our viewers, we invited both candidates here, and Congressman Stelber declined to meet. And we appreciate you taking the time to join us. We covered an awful lot of ground. We got through almost all of our questions, which is good. And we heard a lot about your views. So thank you again. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much, Stephen. Thanks, Dan.